Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, good to see you after, it's been quite a long time, hasn't it?
It's been a long time, far too long, and you've been getting up to all sorts of mischief since I last spoke with you.
Yeah, I've been building businesses, fixing businesses. I mean, that's what I do now. I fix companies.
Yeah.
Um, and then outside that, I go on my little adventures, keep my brain ticking over, keep my body active. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of stuff.
Oh, good. So lockdown isn't keeping you down too much.
Well,
Um,
the nice thing is I live in the middle of nowhere. So to all intents and purposes, lockdown doesn't have a big effect on me personally in my personal life because I'm out here nowhere. I can go out on my bike, I can walk in my garden, I can walk around the fields that surround my house. Well, that's what I did before anyway. I'm not a great shopper.
yeah.
Um, Pubs are closed. That's a bit of a nuisance, but otherwise, no. I just get on and do what I do. And I run the businesses from here, so that's
That's
where
good.
we're at.
Yeah, not too much change for you. Obviously, for many people, it's been a very very big impact on their lifestyle, hasn't it? Work and life balance
Yeah,
probably very, very.
absolutely, and it's had a big impact on our businesses, um, and on our teams. And we spend a lot of time speaking with the teams. Between the lockdown periods, actually trying to meet with the teams and make sure everyone feels that they're still part of a team. But yeah, it's been very difficult. It has.
Yeah, it has. I think it's going to change the way businesses work and the way people live in a multitude of ways, not just remote working, but um, in all sorts of different ways. Is that true of the businesses you're involved with as well? You think is it really going to fundamentally change things?
Yeah, I think. I mean, look, we made some big decisions in the businesses. We closed down for one of the businesses. We closed down head office because COVID made us think about it. But when we asked ourselves whether we needed this kind of facility, the answer was no, and so we made that decision.
Yeah,
But just thinking very personally, I previously would spend a lot of time shooting up and down the motorways, meeting people for an hour and moving. I won't do that in future. I shall do it from here by Zoom because whereas previously, if I said to somebody, "Can we do a Zoom call?" They say, "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not know how to do that."
yeah,
Now it's second nature. Everybody is using Zoom or Teams or another platform, and it's kind of second nature. And I think that will stay, which is a good thing. I mean, we don't need to burn carbon fuels, and we don't need to put more cars on the road, and all of that stuff. So that's good.
yeah. It's going to definitely change the economic model for cities. That's for sure. I'm not sure where that's going to pan out.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be very challenging. I wouldn't want to be owning city centre retail space now, or trying to operate restaurants or coffee bars or other such in certain parts of the country because
Yeah,
they are unviable. Without customers, they're unviable. So that's very challenging.
it is. So enough about lockdown for now. I've been really excited about doing this chat on video because you've achieved so many things. I think people watching this, and me included, will have lots of tips that they can learn from you. And I know lots of the things you've done are really inspiring, will be very inspiring for many people. I wanted to start just by talking a bit about some of your adventures. If that's
Right. Okay.
We'll get onto business and leadership and how companies are becoming more data driven and all these kinds of things. But let's start with some of the challenges that you've taken on, where you really push yourself to the limits, probably of, of a human's physical capabilities. I would think. So you've been to the North and South Poles, climbed mountains, rode across the Atlantic. These are amazing things that most people only dream of achieving one of those things. So I sort of wonder, how did that all get started? Like, what was it within you, if you like, that made you think, yeah, I'm going to do something incredible? Like, how did it begin?
Well, the first thing is I've never thought of it as incredible um, because I grew up in North Wales and I enjoyed sport. I played a lot of cricket, but outside the cricket and during the winter, I would go into the mountains. So
Yeah,
we would go and climb, we'd go and hike through the mountains, we'd camp in the mountains, and that kind of whet my appetite for outdoor activity, and I've done it forever. Um, and my first big mountain, actually, I didn't do until I was 40, and my first very big mountain. And I thought, what should I do for my 40th birthday?
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, well, you've always talked about going up Everest. Why don't you do that? And I thought, there's an idea. So so that became the plan. Now, we didn't get to the top. It's very much weather dependent. And actually, today I was reading an article, this morning's Times, about climbing big mountains. And I looked at some photographs of Everest and the lines, the snaking lines of people. I thought, well, I'll never go back. I'm just not interested in joining a queue on a rope to climb a particular mountain. So I've been up a lot of mountains since. Many of them I've climbed with my son. He's just 30 now, and we've been climbing together since he was 18, I think.
Yeah.
And before that, we would do camping and hiking together. So it's grown from there, and it took on a different dimension when, sadly, I lost my sister to cancer. And when I asked the hospital, would anything have made a difference? And they said, well, you know what, we could do with a monoclonal antibody unit. And I said, great, what's that? And they explained what it was and what's it cost. And I thought, okay, how do I raise that kind of money? And that's when I came up with the idea of walking to the North Pole and the South Pole. And that was with a friend of mine who wanted to do that expedition. And as you do, you shoot the breeze and you think it's a good idea and it's all going to be great fun and can't be that difficult, can it?
It's just
Yeah,
you'll be
yeah. So kind of 2.5 years later, after the training and the prep,
yeah,
we walked to the North Pole, which was great fun. We raised a lot of money. And then I came home, and at that time, my son was about 16. And over dinner one night, I said to my wife, well, I'm now going to walk to the South Pole. And she said, you're crazy. And Matt said, well, you're not going without me this time.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, you're coming then.
Yeah.
So as soon as he was 18, we walked to the South Pole. We raised another chunk of money for the cancer hospital. And that was it. And then I went back to the North Pole again with him because he was old enough to do it. So I've been to the North Pole twice, South Pole once. And then the ocean road. Well, that's just one of those things I kind of think about, and I'd watched people do it. And I have a very good friend in South Africa called Peter Van Ketz. And Peter's a professional adventurer. And we were speaking at a conference together. I was talking about business and he was talking about adventuring.
Yeah.
And he said to me backstage, Kev, you should row the Atlantic. You'd love it. And I said, Peter, I don't know anything about rowing. I don't know anything about water. And I think you're nuts to do it. He said, you'll love it. And he just planted that seed. So I went away and I thought about it. And then I was actually speaking again at a conference in Monaco to the Monaco Yacht Club, 300 yachties. And we're talking about maritime business. And somebody asked me at the end, what's your next adventure? And I said, well, I don't really have one planned, but I'd love to row the Atlantic. You guys are all sailors. Anybody want to come with me? And you get the usual response, which is everyone laughs and then goes very quiet. And then one guy caught me afterwards and he said, were you serious? I said, yeah, I'm serious. He said, I'd love to do it. I'll do it with you. He said, I've got 3 mates and I'll ask them and we'll see whether they want to do it. And so we ended up putting a team of 5 together, which was those 3, me and Matt, my son. Because I'd asked Matt, I said, do you want to do this? He said, no.
Yeah.
I said, why? He said, because it's pain, more pain, and we'll die. I said, well, hopefully we won't. He said, well, no, I don't want to do it. So, okay, so we're a 4-man team. And then I put it on social media, like, okay, I've got the team, we're going to do the ocean. And Matt phoned within about 2 minutes and said, you're serious? I said, yeah, I'm deadly serious. He said, okay, I'm in. So you're in. So that was it. And it was, it was a big adventure. And here's the funny thing. It was my birthday this week. And on my birthday morning, I got a big envelope. And I thought, oh, who sent me a big card? And actually, it wasn't a card at all. It was this.
So yes, exactly. I was definitely going to come to that. So you actually broke a world record with an unsupported row.
Yeah. So we set the fastest time for rowing across the Atlantic, which, considering we aren't rowers, or we weren't rowers, we trained for about 2.5 years. It was just great fun. It was great fun. I mean, it was very challenging, but it was great fun.
I'd like to ask you about that. So with the walks to the North and South Poles and with the row, you talk about them as though it's just a long walk, or but I'm sure the level of endurance that you need, and the sort of kind of mental resilience as well as physical fitness must be, I assume, must be incredible, and must require a lot of training. So I was
Yeah,
kind
the
of curious,
training was very extensive.
can you tell me
For
more
the
about that?
row,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, just for the row, we logged on the website um, the amount, the miles we'd run, the miles we'd cycled, the miles we'd rode, the
Yeah,
amount of weights we'd lifted, and by the time we started the race, to put it in perspective, we had lifted the equivalent of a World War II destroyer. So that's how much weight we were
wow.
lifting.
Yeah,
Um, I can't remember how far we had cycled, but it was, kind of halfway around the world, and then we'd run the other half of the way around the world. So the training was intense, as well as um, all the educational training. So we had to learn how to navigate, how to use radio, first aid, electronics, all kinds of stuff. And then the punishment on the body is immense. I mean, we finished in February, and here we are now, what, 7, 8 months later, and I am still recovering. I'm still
yeah,
recovering from it.
really.
Yeah, it's and you can see it in your body. You see your nails stop growing, and because you're just taking a hammer, absolute hammer, for 40 days.
Yeah,
Um, we never stopped growing. We took 20 minutes off to celebrate Christmas, and we did that because we rode through November, December into January.
yeah,
And we took that 20 minutes off on New Year's Eve because the weather was so favorable to row on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day that we didn't stop. Whereas on New Year's Eve, it was a bit less favorable, so we gave ourselves 20 minutes off, and that was it. That was the
wow.
only rest in 40 days. So yeah, it's a huge,
It is
huge
a
impact
test.
on your body.
Yeah, a real endurance test. And are there times, did some things happen sometimes in any of those adventures where you feared for your life, or did it get as extreme as that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been stuck on mountains. We climbed a mountain. I think which one it was now. I think it was Elbrus, which isn't a particularly high mountain. It's 15,000 feet. It's one of the 7 summits, but we got snowed in, and we were snowed in for a week, to such a point that we had to keep digging ourselves out of our tents to make sure we didn't suffer carbon dioxide poisoning, because you just get buried. So you're under the snow. Your tent is completely buried in 6 feet of snow. So you have to keep digging out to give yourself air. So stuff like that. Um, and then on the row, we had two incidents on the row which were a bit spooky. The first one was the first night, actually, and we have a weather router on shore. So
Yeah,
we're self-contained in the boat. It's a 23-foot plastic rowing boat. That's all it is,
yeah,
and everything is in there. Somebody said to me, "Do you have a support vessel?" No, it's just us. Our food is in there. We have a desalination plant to make water, and we have a tiny cabin at each end where we can go in and lock. It's airtight. We can lock ourselves in if it gets really bad. But the cabin is, I mean, it's the size of a car boot, and you've got 3 blokes in there, so it's tiny.
yeah,
Um, and on the first night, we our weather router said, "Look, go north, guys. Everyone else has gone south. It's a race. Everyone else has gone south. No, go north. There's a storm coming. You're going to pick up the following wind. You're going to get a good push along." So that's what we did, and that was fine until about midnight, and the storm, as they tend to do, changed direction a bit. And so it was my my first introduction to the inside of an Atlantic storm in December
yeah.
in an open rowing boat.
Scary.
And to give you an idea of how fierce it was, we have carbon fiber oars, and the shaft on them is, I don't know, 60 millimeters carbon fiber. And 2 of those oars broke in 5 seconds. Just snap, gone, bosh, huge noise, bang. And so we're now cut loose in this storm. The oars on one side have gone. We've got 2 spare oars, so we've now lost any spares. And we have to drop a parrot anchor. So we drop a parrot anchor, which is like dropping a parachute in the water
Yeah,
to kind of hold yourself steady. You can't row against this
Yeah.
And we basically hunkered down in the cabin, locked ourselves in, and you're in a plastic box for 12 hours being thrown around by an Atlantic storm, listening. I'm an engineer. I'm a structural engineer. It's where I started. And I'm listening to this boat, and I'm at one end of it, and I know my son is at the other end of it in another air sealed box. And all I could hear is this boat creaking and groaning. And I'm thinking, well, I hope it doesn't break, because it'll all get a bit interesting if it does. But we got through the night,
Yeah.
and off we went. And then halfway across, literally at 1,500 miles, we got hit from the stern by a big wave that lifted us up, and then a huge wave on the beam flipped us over, just turned us upside down. And there were three of us rowing, and suddenly we weren't tipped out of the boat, we were thrown out of the boat to the end of our tether. We're tethered in, boing, and you drop in the water. And all I remember is thinking, oh, this water's a little bit warmer than I expected. And I looked to my left, and I could see I was about 4 feet underwater. And I looked to my left, and I could see my son was there swimming up. So I thought, he's okay. And we popped up, and then we had to right the boat. And the two guys who were off duty and sleeping, I mean, their world had just turned upside down. So they woke up wondering what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
And we could see their face poking out this little tiny window we've got.
Yeah.
And they're wondering, and anyway, we get the boat back up, and we climb in, and we have a laugh about it, and off we go.
It must have been terrifying at the time. And that first incident you described happened on the first night. Now, I imagine there would be many people who would just give up at that point and say, well, this is not, for me. How do you not give up in moments like that? Especially if they happen early on, when it's pretty easy to turn back.
Yeah, I mean, there were people in the race who unfortunately had to call it a day. And it's exacerbated. That storm night was exacerbated because three of the guys on the boat were violently ill. So you've got them being violently sick, you've got the boat being tossed all over the place, and you're locked into a cabin. So it's not a comfortable environment. But you've spent 3 years getting to that point, and rationally, you can't do anything about it. You can't say, okay, I've had enough, get me out of here, because there's nobody to get you out of here. Nobody's going to come and rescue you.
Yeah.
So you've got to survive through the night. And then in the morning, we took stock and realized that the 2 oars were finished. We had 2 spares, I say. And we had a conversation and said, what do you think, guys? Do we try and limp back to shore, which is 100 miles behind us? Or do we reset our minds and crack on? And there was never more than 2 seconds where people said, no, off we go.
I think the preparation, the huge commitment that you had put into the preparation, I guess helps you get through those moments, because, you're only 100 miles away from the shore. You could row back rather than try and go another 3,000 miles forwards. But you put 2 or 3 years into this, that
exactly.
the actual commitment to what you're doing must be so high that it drives you on. Is that really what it is? And I also wonder, just as a second question around that is, how do you think those experiences have affected the way you are in business or in life?
Okay, so to answer the first question, I say there was a gap of no more than 2 seconds when we reflected, are we in good shape? Can we continue? Yeah.
Yep.
And we'd worked so closely together. We'd been out in the ocean together over the past 2 or 3 years training together. So we all knew each other very well. Yep. There were no histrionics. Nobody was making a noise. Nobody was scared. Nobody was panicking. And so it was a case of refocus and go. So that was never really a big issue of should we give up? No, of course we're not going to give up. How does it affect you? Well, I have to say, when you've been through that, when you look back on it, it's actually a great experience in a weird kind of way, because you realize if you can deal with that, you've got no chance of rescue. You are completely self-contained. You're in 2 miles deep water with a storm all around you. If you can get through that, you can get through anything.
Yeah.
And what it done for me over time is, whenever I get in a challenging situation in business, I just reflect, hang on, how serious is this really? And I've been in a lot of businesses, I said to you at the beginning, I fix companies. And I typically go into companies where people say, it's finished, Kev. You'll never do anything. Oh, we're dead.
Yeah.
No, you're not, guys. You're a long, long, long way from dead. What you've lost is your belief and your focus in what you can achieve.
Yeah.
And let's rebuild that. And once people buy into and understand and are part of that revisioning of where we can go and take this business, you will see the energy will come back. And people have to believe, it's a classic. If the three guys in the boat who were experienced mariners, they are super yacht crew. That's what they do for a living. So these guys do sail around the world. They never rowed before, but they do sail around the world. Now, if those three collectively had said, "Oh my goodness, we're finished. This is all over," then Matt and I, who were the inexperienced mariners, would get nervous.
Yep.
But no, when everybody says, "We got through this, we can get through this, we'll get through the next storm, let's go."
Yep.
And it's the same in business. So what I talk to people in business about is confidence. Have confidence, but have confidence based on a clear understanding of where we're going to take the business to.
Yeah.
And you will always get the naysayers. You always get people, "Oh, you'll never get there. Oh, it'll never happen." Oh, hang on, it will. I think I've turned around now or rebuilt 17 companies, and on every one, 10% of the 10% of the team will tell me, "You'll never fix it. It'll never get fixed."
Yeah.
And you know what? Touch wood, it always has, and it always will.
One of the things I often kind of heard about entrepreneurs, obviously I could call myself an entrepreneur now at least once, and I often heard about entrepreneurs or leaders in bigger businesses that one of the biggest characteristics of leadership is optimism. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely true.
because if you have this optimistic belief that you can achieve something, a lot of the barriers, well, to be honest, in my case, feel sometimes I'm blind to those barriers. Can be a blind spot for me to see the pitfalls and the barriers that might be in the way, because my optimism and enthusiasm sort of sees beyond that. And it's important, I think, to have people around you who can see those barriers and help you break down the problems. But I think if you don't have that kind of blind optimism, hopefully not too blind, you wouldn't start.
I think you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. My whole life, people have said to me, "Kev, you're just over optimistic." And I've said, "Well, hang on. Let's just be clear. I'm a working class lad from the back end of Macclesfield, middle of Nowheresville, and I've ended up running some big companies. And I don't believe I've got some incredible talent. What I do believe is I believe it can be done, and so I go and do it." And if you thought rationally, I was 60 years old when I started rowing that boat. Do you think rationally, 60 years old, never rowed before, you're going to cross the Atlantic and set the world record now? You got to be kidding me. I said, "No, we can do it. We can do it." And we did it.
Did you set out to set the world record? I want to get back to business in a second to make that question pop to my head. But did you set out to achieve a world record, or you just set out to get to the other side?
No, we set out to start as friends and finish as friends, because we'd heard of crews where, under the stress of the environment, they'd fall out with each other, and it'd all become very difficult. And they got out of the boat in the Caribbean, and they'd never spoken to each other again, which was a terrible shame. And so we said, we're going to start as friends, we're going to finish as friends, and we are going to do the best we can possibly do in crossing this ocean.
Yeah.
And we had looked at, there's a team called the Four Oarsmen who had set the world record a couple of years previously for a four-man. We looked at them and said, "Wow, how fantastic. Imagine doing that."
Yeah.
And we even debated the night before we started how serious we were about racing versus enjoying it.
Yeah.
And there was still some chit-chat back and forth about, well, you know what, if some whales were to surface next to the boat, we're going to stop and we're going to take photographs, we're going to enjoy the moment. And we decided things like that. But otherwise, we said, we will grit our teeth and we will keep rowing. Yes. And so there was kind of a blend. And it was 2 weeks before we got to the Caribbean that we spoke to the race organizers, because they call in, you have a satellite phone, they call in once every few days to make sure you're still alive, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they said, "Do you know you guys are on for world record time?" And we honestly said, "No, we hadn't appreciated that." And they
Right.
said, "Well, you are." And from that, for the last 2 weeks, then it became serious.
That was
Yeah.
motivating.
Then we were in a race. Then we were um, measuring our
You
daily mileage, and
want to
we
sustain
had it
it,
timed down.
what an amazing thing to hear. And then the motivation
Yeah,
to sustain that must have been incredible. And I'm thinking about, like, in business, if we apply that to business, so sometimes, certainly with my business, talk about my experience briefly, and then you could perhaps tell us what you think about the approach in other businesses. But some businesses, they're very target driven, and they would have set out on a journey like that with a clear goal, with like a target of hitting a time, or something objective. Um, and then other businesses, certainly my business when it started, was much more about the journey. Was much more about, well, let's create something that we think is good. Let's do some great work. Let's find some really cool people that can help others, and let's build. Let's just see where that leads us. Let's see what happens, and enjoy the journey. And no doubt, in my optimistic head, no doubt, if you can achieve that, then the business side will look after itself. But this kind of, I heard the word coddywomple for the first time not too long ago, which was this idea of striving purposefully for an unknown destination. And this sort of idea of we're just enjoying the journey and seeing where it takes us can actually lead to amazing achievements in business. And yet the traditional approach to business would seem to be more geared towards sort of targets and objectives and so on. Now, at the moment, the world, I think, is becoming much more data driven. It's important to understand what your goals are and how you measure them, and in that you can gauge your progress. You just talked about that in terms of your time on the journey, motivated you to go further and faster. So, so I wonder what your take is on all of that, and whether you
yeah.
kind of you've mentioned it in terms of the row, but I'm interested in how you approach it in business.
Well, my take on it is similar on both sides. So, okay, we've got a piece of paper that says we've got a world record, big deal.
Yeah.
When we talk about it as a crew, because we're all still very much in contact with each other, and we're talking about doing something else together. We don't talk about the world record. What we talk about is, do you remember that day when? Do you
Yeah.
remember that part when? Do you
When it-
remember when Sam did this? Do you remember when Matt did that?
Yeah.
And it's about the journey. I mean, it's an intense experience, but it's a wonderful experience. We locked up with these guys on a boat for 40 days where everything is down to you. It's just the most wonderful experience. It's the same on any expedition. It becomes very much a team effort.
Do you feel you're able to apply that same rationale in business, though, where you've got
Absolutely. Yeah,
investors,
absolutely.
money at stake?
When I talk about businesses, I don't talk about numbers. And I say to people, tell me your plan. And they say, well, we want to get 2% market. No, don't tell me any numbers. I don't want to hear any numbers. Tell me what you want to build. Tell me what you want to create. What's the dream? What's the passion? And I firmly believe that people are extraordinary. And everybody in a business is extraordinary in their own way. Some people are artists, some are mathematicians, some are programmers, some are communicators. People are incredible. But what we need to have is a shared goal, a shared vision of success. And so when I get hold of a business, the first thing I talk about is what's our vision? What does success look like?
Yeah.
And you start talking about people about that, and they'll say, well, it's a bit woolly, isn't it? I say, well, it's not, because that's where we want to go. And I don't want to run a business where all we measure every month are the numbers. It's just boring. And it's not what inspires people. People want to come on a journey. People want to be able to look back and say, hey, look what we did. Look what we did. Look, isn't that incredible? I mean, when we turned Porsche around from edge of bankruptcy to number one in the market, people remember the bad times. That's a funny thing. When I I went in a couple of years ago to film a documentary, and still some of the people I work with are still there. And they said, Kev, do you remember when we didn't have money for this, or we did this in a different way?
Yeah.
That's what they remember. They don't remember when it got good again. That's okay, it got good again, great. But they remember being in a team when we were fighting our way forward, and it's the journey. And that's what I talk about.
Yeah, I think that, and with your stories about the rowing and so on, and the being snowed in, overcoming adversity together builds probably extremely strong, deep relationships and big commitment and loyalty to the business as well. And I guess that's, if you have that kind of outcome, then the business outcomes will surely follow, I suppose, is the sort of logic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I use the analogy of football. Goals are what determine the win, but you've got to play great football to score the goals. So let's focus on playing great football, and then the goals will come. So if we get better, bigger will come. So let's focus on getting better. Let's focus on doing what we do better, on improving the way we do things, changing the way we do things. That's what I believe, and I speak at conferences all over the world. That's what I speak about. How to get a team to get better, to engage with each other, to become passionate, and to change the business through their will. Yes, we'll as leaders we'll provide the direction, but you need the team to own it, to be inspired by it, and that's absolutely what I believe. And the numbers are secondary. We'll achieve the numbers because we'll be great at what we do.
I guess the numbers give you a gauge as to where you are, whether you're on track, whether these philosophies you're describing are working. They're a good health check in a sense, but they shouldn't.
Yeah, sure. And your investors need to know the numbers. Your shareholders have invested in the company because they want a return, and that's absolutely true. But the best way I can give them a return is by getting a business that's buzzing, that's inspired, that's engaged, that's really wanting to create something that's extraordinary. And if we do that, we go on and we build a great company, and the numbers do follow. The numbers will follow.
You're right. I'm a football coach as well, by the way, in my limited spare time. And you're right. We don't talk to players about something as simplistic as you just need to score more goals than the opposition. Like we all know this. This is a fundamental that we all already understand. It won't help us improve or play better or develop better players and better results by talking about scoring more goals, because obviously that is in the end the measure of success. But instead, of course, we focus on the details of how each player's technique and how the team work together, and the assumption is that will lead to more goals. So you're right. It's a good metaphor in that sense, because we wouldn't really dream of just banging on about scoring goals, because we know. And the
goals are the result. If you get better at passing, get better at organisation, better at defending, your strikers learn to improve their skills on how to capture and shoot the ball, you'll score more goals.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I believe in business.
They're really focusing on the execution more than the result. Is really the key point. So thinking about leadership and some of the stuff you've mentioned around vision and optimism and having a purpose that people can sign up to, I think is fantastic. But what sort of other traits of leadership do you think are most important today? Because obviously, having worked in businesses and in leadership roles for many, many years, do you think it's changed over time? And regardless, do you think what do you think are the biggest qualities of a good leader today?
I don't think it's changed that much over time. The famous stories, was it Alexander the Great, who they presented him with a helmet of water and he poured it away.
Yeah.
Say, I don't drink before the troops drink. And that's about integrity. It's about authenticity. It's about trust. And I think these words, certainly during the COVID period, these words have come more and more to the fore. And I do despair a bit when I hear people's reaction to COVID. Oh, we need to get a set of values in the company. And we are. Hang on, it's nothing to do with COVID, not a thing.
Yeah.
Why was that stuff not there before? Why did your enterprise not understand what your values are, what your passion is before COVID? COVID's a short-term crisis. It's a horrible crisis. It's a terrible crisis. But in the scale of the world, it's a short-term crisis. And thankfully, vaccines are coming, and hopefully, sometime next year we'll get back to some degree of normality. So it'll be 18 months-ish of absolute pain and disturbance. But that's still relatively short time in the history of the world.
Yeah.
So I say to people when I'm talking to them about their business, stop talking about after COVID. Stop it. Stop it. I've lived through various recessions and the stock market crash, Black Monday and Black Tuesday and Pink Wednesday and whatever the press called them, I can't remember now.
Yep.
When everybody told me it had finished, everything's over. No, it's not. It's not. But if you want to be successful for the long term, then have a clarity of vision within your business. What is it you want to achieve, and what are those values? Now, the values are shared, determined, and have to be displayed by the leadership team. And I don't think those values have changed. The most important is authenticity, trust, integrity, effective communication, honesty. All of these soft, if you like, soft values are what people look for when they're aligning to a leader. They also need you to be tough. They also need to see that clear decisions are made, that communication is simple and straightforward and is understood. And one of the challenges of being a leader is being brave enough to make the tough decisions, because sometimes the right thing to do is not the obvious thing to do. And everybody will say, "Oh, you can't do that. We can't do that." I mean, I've been changing businesses for 30 years, and people say, "Oh, you can't do that. Why?" "Well, no, you can't touch that." "Well, we are going to touch that. We are going to change that." "Well, it works already." "It doesn't work very well, does it?" "So what if we could double its efficiency or double its effectiveness or make it truly world class?"
How do you balance, like, I really agree with everything you said, actually, but how do you balance this thing of bringing people with you, creating that trust, authenticity, and so on, getting people inspired by the vision, getting them to follow and believe in where you're going, and then you make the hard decisions. You have to make some tough decisions. You make some changes people don't like, don't agree with. May even be a lot of fear. Maybe people are losing jobs. All sorts of negative issues, I guess, around change, even if that change is hopefully going to lead to a much more positive place for the majority in the end. So how do you balance those two things? How do you, because you can inspire someone when something's great and you go into a great place, everyone believes in it, and you're on track and it's a really enjoyable ride. But when you have to wade through the challenges and make some really difficult decisions, it's very easy to lose the support of the people you need.
Yeah, I mean, if you are trying to take a business onto a new level, and whether that's a business that's in distress, and a lot of businesses right now in distress, or whether it's a business doing quite well, and you say, "You know what, we're going on to the next level," then you're not always going to be popular. My approach to it, somebody told me a long time ago, "Kev, it's like a bank account. If you want to take money out of it, you've got to put some money into it. So if you want the goodwill of the team around you to support you in a difficult situation, then make sure you bank goodwill. So make sure that the team understand who you are and why you're doing this, and keep coming back to it, what that vision of success is, so that the decisions that you are seen to make, whilst it can be difficult, people understand the context. They understand why. It isn't a surprise." I mean, look, when I ran Porsche, I fired 50% of the staff. 50%.
Yeah.
It was horrific. And I'd already been in that business for 5 years, so I knew all of these people. And I knew them, and I knew their husbands and their wives and their kids. I knew them. And I still had to cut the headcount to save the business. And I'll tell you honestly, Kelly, I went back into my nice, new, swanky CEO's office, and I locked the door, and I cried my eyes out. I just fired 50% of my friends. It was just horrendous. And I swore to myself I would never do that again. I would never be in a business where I had to do that again.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I haven't been, because we found different ways. That situation was a crisis. It was exceptional.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, when we talk about hard decisions, always the hardest decisions are those that affect other people, and particularly people that trust.
Yeah, terrible.
You sometimes it's like you owe something to these people because they've helped you get to where you are in all the positive senses, and then you have to cut. And it's
so it comes back to running a business in a different way. Running the business so that instead of ever being stable and considering yourself, "Hey, we're okay, we're stable. Look, we grew 3% this year." You have to be pushing the business to want to go on to the next level of success, because that development is what maintains the security of people. People are not secure in a business when a business is just running along doing the same thing.
No.
Because somebody is going to look at you, another company is going to look at you and say, right, well, we'll disintermediate them, or we can do this differently.
Yeah.
And so you have to be driving and changing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because when you're in a growth company, and a lot of people have been in growing companies and shrinking companies, there's no doubt that being in a growing company is a lot of fun. It's usually stressful and difficult. There's lots of challenging problems that come with growth, but nevertheless, you're up for that because it's exciting. There's lots of opportunity for people. There's security, and it's obviously quite different at the other end of the spectrum. But yeah, like you, I had to do similar things at times, and there's nothing. I never found anything that made it any easier. If you're a humane kind of person and you respect and want to look after people, which I think most leaders do, regardless of how others may sometimes see leaders, most really care about their people and will find decisions like that personally.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, the phrase I use is, I've never met anybody who wants to do a bad job.
Yeah.
Never. You get some people who are a bit hacked off, and you can tell that they're disengaged, and that's a case then of management leadership, of understanding what their issue is. But most people want to do a great job, and my role as a leader is to ensure that they understand what that great job is and how they contribute to achieving the vision of success. How does what I'm doing achieve that goal? And when you can make that connection, when as a leader you can share the plan. I mean, I have three phases that I use. Commit, which is let's commit to achieve something extraordinary. And then there's the connect. How do we connect everything to that vision of success?
Yeah.
When you can make that connect very open and visible and transparent, and people get where they're making the contribution, then it flies. Then it runs, because, come back to my point, people are incredible. Everyone has different skills. If I can get people to engage their passion, their knowledge, their creativity, then we can improve the business.
Yeah.
I ran a boat company, and when I got there, it was the business had gone through 10 years of losses. They'd gone through 13 rounds of redundancy. And you can imagine what the morale in that business was like.
Yeah.
And within 14 months, we got that business back into profit, people smiling, and customers placing orders. And that was all about re-engaging the team and recognizing that the skill set was in the team. I don't know how to build a boat. I don't know anything about boats. But there were people in that team who did. And when we allowed them to use their creativity, they improved that business. Yeah. Better ways to do things, better ways to improve the boats, increase quality, smarter decisions. It was all there. So our job as leaders is to capture that creativity, capture that knowledge, and focus the innovation into the same direction. Don't be a genius. Don't try and be a genius as a leader. Be a genius creator. A genius creator is engage people to put all their bits of genius together and make one whole genius to drive the business.
That's interesting, yeah. And sort of fixing companies, you described some of the challenges, and I would think when you go into a troubled business, distressed business, or one that's just not achieving what it needs to achieve, then I'm assuming you see some common issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned the kind of the vision, the commit piece, committing to a bigger vision and some sort of destination that re-engages people. You've talked about connect, making sure their work links to that vision and understand how they're contributing to the success. But what would you say? Can you just talk a bit about some of the common themes you see in a trouble you've worked with, and maybe some of the things that can be done about it?
Well, the underlying feeling, you walk into a business that's troubled or in deep difficulty, the underlying feeling is gloom.
Yeah.
Everyone's a bit scared. And typically I turn up and I've been asked to go in by the banks or by the investors or by somebody. And the first thing that people imagine is, I'm going to go in with a big knife, but I'm going to cut everyone's head off.
Yeah.
Which couldn't be further from what I actually want to do. It couldn't be further from the truth. So you walk into a business that's usually subdued. People are afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
So that's the first issue that's usually very visible. The second thing is, even though I don't talk about numbers, very often the controls in the business are poor. So there isn't the control on cash utilization, on um, managing the working capital in the business. Without getting too technical, are we getting in what's owed to us, and are we managing what goes out? And very often, it's almost got to the point where management is saying, well, whatever we do doesn't matter, so let it go. Or even worse, you've got a dictatorial head who is spraying commands around the business without context, and then everybody's afraid to do anything.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of issues that I see quite frequently, and it's a case of getting the business under control first. So let's just make sure we're not bleeding to death. So let's stop the cash bleeding out of the business. Let's understand where we can get some revenue from, or whether investors will put some more money into the business. And let's just get a stable base, that this boat isn't sinking. Let's stop the thing sinking first. Then we need to work out, where are we going to point the boat? Where are we going to? Are we going to Antigua, or are we going to New York, or are we just going to Scotland? Which is it? Because it's quite a big difference. So we decide that.
Yep.
And then how are we going to get there? And a huge amount of what I do and what I help management to do is communication. Communication.
Yeah.
Communicate forwards. Tell your team before you tell the world. Any business where the staff are finding out what's going on by reading it in the press, that's got a huge problem. So you should be telling the team first. And it comes back to, we've got to start putting some money into the goodwill bank account, when people start believing again, start giving you some credit. And when they see you make a difficult decision, they get it. And your credit might go down a little bit, but they get it. And so most of it, honestly, you've got two sides. You've got the hard side, which is the cash management in the early stages.
Yeah.
And then you've got the soft side, which is all about where are we going, communication, engagement, and inspiration. Because we have the commit, we build the connect, and the third piece that I talk about is create, and that's create magic. And the magic is the culture. Because when you've got people saying, yeah, we can do this, then it's a whole different game.
You're halfway there at that moment.
Yeah, it's a whole different game.
It's interesting because when it comes to the numbers, and obviously you just said when you go into trouble business, the first thing you have to do is get control of the numbers and make sure that you're not leaking, you're not hemorrhaging, that you get those things in place. And then it's more about resetting the vision and getting people committed and creating within that. That sounds fantastic. And the fundamentals of the numbers, I always think all businesses in a way, the problems are usually similar, aren't they? It's not enough sales usually, too much cost, or a cash flow problem where the money's coming in after it has to go out, and usually a combination of the three, of course. And I guess in a sense you have to dig deeper into understanding sort of why those things are why they are, and start to put a few changes in place in order to change those dynamics. So I guess in a sense business is simple, isn't it? And the difficult part,
business is simple.
Is the people aspect, which is what you're talking about.
Yes, it is, and you mentioned it a few minutes ago. We talked about the limitations.
Yeah,
big part of it is getting people to release themselves from self-imposed limitations. Most limitations in this world, I believe, are self-imposed. Oh, I'd love to row the ocean, but I couldn't possibly. Well, listen, if this fat old 60-year-old bloke can do it, you can do it. So take that limitation away. It's then a case of, okay, how do I do it? How do I get the project together? How do I raise the capital to buy the boat and train the team and.
Yeah.
And so it really is a case of getting people to understand, allowing people, inviting people to understand that they can do this. They can do this.
Yeah. So first the belief, but then the commitment part. So many people don't get past the belief hurdle. Like they don't believe they could do that. Even if they do, they then don't commit. You talked about spending 2 or 3 years training for one of these adventures.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your main, it's not your living. And so the level of commitment behind some of the things we talked about. Not your adventure's obviously massive. Lots of people will never do those things, but in business, where even in small businesses, on a smaller scale, the same applies, doesn't it? Even if you get beyond the belief part, the commitment usually requires an immense effort.
Yes, it does.
Many people don't commit to the effort or put the effort in.
Yes, it does.
They could get there.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Any business can be world class if it's determined to be world class.
Yeah.
But it needs the whole team to be determined to be world class. And that's where the best teams win.
Yeah.
And you come back to difficult decisions. I frequently get asked, what do you do if you've got somebody in the team who doesn't want to be part of it? And I used to say, and I used to do, well, I could spend 2 or 3 years trying to turn them around. I don't do that anymore. I really don't.
Yeah.
Because if this isn't their dream, well, that's fine, but go and find your own dream. And so I use the phrase, don't waste your time with people who waste your time. If you don't want to be part of this, doesn't make you a bad person, but go and find something that you want to do that lights your fire, that inspires you. Because we don't have the time to wait for you, and we certainly don't have the somebody's back to give you a piggyback. You either want to be part of this team or you don't. You imagine having somebody in a rowing boat who doesn't want to be there. What would it be like? It would destroy the morale in the whole team. You can't do that.
Too many people probably hang on in companies longer than they should. I think that's probably a fair comment. I don't mean any offense to anyone, but I think I'm quite a believer in this idea of sometimes asking people to recommit. I think that's what you're talking about. Is we've got this new vision, this bold vision, with how some of the hard decisions we need to make to turn things around. And do you buy into that? And are you recommitting, or are you not? And if you're not,
exactly,
it's totally fine to go somewhere else where you'll be happier. But if you are, that sense of recommitting can actually invigorate you and create energy, like when you first joined that business.
Yeah. I work with a very smart lady. She's co-invested with me in a number of the businesses, and she has a phrase which is contract of purpose. Because contract of purpose, because I don't only work in troubled businesses. I start businesses, and I work in growing businesses where they want to grow faster. So I work in all kinds of companies. But Kay's expression is contract of purpose, which means you bring people in, and it might be with a view that this is going to be a 2-year, a 3-year, a 4-year project for them to help you to go from here to here. But they're probably not the right person to be in the business forever. So let's understand that contract of purpose means they will be with you for as long as they are adding that value. They are doing the job that they're brought in to do. But there comes a point when, you know what, entirely naturally, they should go on and find their next contract of purpose. And I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's not like the job for life was probably over long ago, and very often that decision to move on is usually from the individual themselves, isn't it? And
exactly,
you are maybe with a company for a phase of the journey that suits your skills and interests, and in another phase it doesn't, and that's fine. What isn't fine is it doesn't suit you, but you stay on. And you drag everybody else down with you. I suppose that's not fine, but it's completely fine that you're into it for a period or a phase of the journey or your life. And if you can get people to recommit or voluntarily go on to do something they do love, then I guess you're in a good place where you've got most people motivated and behind it,
Yes, and when I ask people or invite people to leave the business, then I'm usually very, very supportive of helping them to move on to the next phase in their career. I say it doesn't make them bad people. It's just they don't want to play football. They actually realize they want to play rugby. Yeah. Okay, right, let's help you get into a rugby team. Yeah. That'll be great for you.
Yeah.
And let's stay friends. Let's stay friends. We're not falling out here.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Although in practice it's very awkward, I think, but it does make complete sense. I want to ask you about data, Kevin, because I know, so one of our key focuses in 101 Ways is around helping clients to become more data-driven, to become a more data-driven organization. And I'm aware you've worked in and led multiple data businesses. I would have seen different uses of data within all of the businesses that you work
Indeed,
on.
where we first met, Kelly, where we first met.
Of course, of course. And the data seems to be now a much, much bigger topic. And I think the reason for that is that the technology and the capabilities we have now allow us to process vastly more data than we ever could. And so as people move more and more towards digital products and consuming their services, if you like, from the companies more and more online, and we can gather all of this data and we have the capabilities now to process all of it, and then it brings new challenges and opportunities to businesses that maybe weren't there before or were there but couldn't really be successfully tapped into. So I just wonder if you could talk a bit about kind of what you think around this kind of whole drive towards being more data driven, and what your views are on the challenges and opportunities that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, one could argue the data's always been there, because there have always been customers doing certain things and spending money in certain ways and looking in different places for information. The difference now is that modern technology can capture each one of those activities, and so huge amounts of data are collected and collated, and the phrase "big data" is born. Big data's interesting. Small data's even more interesting to me. I want to know what my customers are thinking about me. I want to know what I can do within my business to enhance the experience of my customer when dealing with my brand. And so data is critically important. But what is also critically important is the correct and legal use and application of that data. And so I'm a firm believer that consumer data is very important. If you want to improve your business, you need to know what your consumers want from you. You need to know how to improve your products and services that you offer to them. But at the same time, you need to use that data in an effective way. And one of the businesses, I talked about founding businesses. And one of the businesses I created about 2 years ago with another colleague, a lady who I'd worked with for a couple of years previously, is absolutely about data compliance. The data regulations now are very strict. GDPR has had two effects on the market. One, it's provided a framework within which to become and maintain data compliance. But two, it's put everybody to sleep. You say the acronym GDPR, everyone goes, oh, yeah. But actually, it's really, really important. And so what we did was look at that and say, how do we make it easy for people to become compliant and maintain compliance, and then use data in a way that enhances their business? If I'm an SME, I want to use data to generate more sales. Data per se, storing data per se, is of limited value to me. Yes, I have my customer database and I have information in that. But more importantly, how do I use that to create more value? How do I build my business by the appropriate and legal use of this data? And so we looked at this from the market's perspective and from users' perspective. We created this business which is called ICAS, ICAAS, ICAS. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're helping, we target SMEs, and we're helping SMEs to become legally compliant. And we can do it within 48 hours. People think of this as months and months of work. No, not with our tool. 48 hours you can become compliant, and then you can remain compliant. And then you can focus using your data to drive improvements in your business. So data is critically important. You've got to use it carefully.
Yeah, that's obviously we've all seen very high-profile stories in the press of companies that didn't use the data legally or appropriately with the right consent.
Yeah, and huge fines, huge fines. And the thing is that a lot of businesses go, oh well, BA got fined whatever it was, £200 million. That doesn't mean anything to me. Well, it does actually. Actually, it does. It means that the Information Commissioner's Office is looking at the market and saying, what are you doing to effectively manage data? Because if you have a breach or a customer reports you for a breach, we're going to come in and look and see what are your processes. And if you don't have any, you're in trouble. And that's exactly why we built ICAS, because you put ICAS in, you've got the processes. So without trying to sell you my product, what I'm saying is appropriate compliance is very important.
Yeah.
But once you achieve that, that's a kind of housekeeping. Then use your data to build your business and make it exciting.
Yeah, I think also not. You talked about it in terms of using data for marketing purposes or generate sales leads, and that's an area that's been data driven for probably quite a long time. And then the new laws are really around protecting privacy and sort of intrusive marketing approaches, things like that. But I think also in more recent years, what we've seen people do with data is use it to enrich their products, their digital products. So, for example, when we're using Google, we're using Facebook, we're using, so it could be LinkedIn, whatever it might be, increasingly we're very aware, I suppose, that these companies are using the data they have about us, about our usage on the platform, about our profiles, about what we like and share. They're using that to actually drive far richer experiences where we then see content that's more relevant to us. Even if we have to see adverts, we're seeing adverts that might be relevant to us rather than things that are not. And they're creating a much more positive user experience as a result of the way they use the data to enrich their products. But at the same time, I think we all feel probably quite suspicious about what else they might do with that data, how they might not use it with our consent to do some things that are more intrusive that we didn't necessarily know they were going to do with it. And I know that the cookie laws that came in some time ago that made every website ask us if we're okay with cookies. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but it's just like every website pops up saying okay with cookies, and you just click okay because you're not going to read every website you visit.
Sure.
Their terms and conditions, and so in actual fact, it's done nothing other than get in the way of the user experience, and we're still really none the wiser what they're really going to do with their data.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. I mean, when the GDPR regulation was announced, all kinds of companies cancelling their mailing lists and stopping doing this and that, which they didn't need to do. There's a misunderstanding about what is legal, what is appropriate, and again, I think it's important that businesses understand that and keep coming back to it. That's why we built iCast, to help people through that process, make it pain free.
Yeah, well, it sounds great. What do you think are the sort of major new capabilities that businesses need? So before you would think, oh, you need sales, you need marketing, you need some kind of operations to deliver your product or service, you need customer services, but there are some like new capabilities that are probably fundamental to most businesses now that were not even jobs 5 or 10 years ago.
Sure.
But what's your view on that?
I think, I mean, a lot of it's technology driven, and a lot of it is driven not by what the business can push, but what the client expects.
Yeah.
We here we all are in lockdown doing our shopping online, and I saw an interesting study done by Salesforce.com that said 89% of consumers will pay more for a better product. 82% of consumers will pay more for a better experience, irrelevant to the product, the total experience of dealing with the company. But 60-something, 62, 63% of consumers will switch their purchasing to Amazon because the logistics are so good. And when you think, I sit here, as I say, I sit in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a field, and I can order something on Amazon this afternoon and it will turn up at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And that's pretty phenomenal. And, there's all these arguments about Amazon good or bad, but their logistics operation is pretty slick.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? They've changed, they've raised the bar. They've changed their expectations about when things should arrive.
Yes.
How easy they should be to find. And, you can go on the app in a few seconds, find something, order it, and it says there tomorrow. It's one-click ordering, and it's like they've completely, they're dominating the market because they've rethought the whole experience.
And I feel guilty sometimes buying stuff on Amazon because I'm drawing my spend to Amazon. But I'll give you for instance. Yesterday, my next door neighbour is an elderly couple. And the chap, Barry, he's in his 80s, sharp as a pin, but in his 80s. And he asked me yesterday, could I go and have a look at his printer? He was trying to print something from his computer. And he couldn't get the printer to work. So cut long story short, I went and had a look. and he had the wrong cartridges in it, and it was rejecting it because they were the wrong cartridges. Where have we got these cartridges from?
Yeah.
So I said, I'll fix that for you. I said, but I can't do it today. I had board meetings yesterday. I said, but I'll do it tomorrow. Now, do I get in my car and go and drive around Newbury, where most of the shops are closed, to try and find him some Hewlett-Packard 301 cartridges? Or do I just come in here yesterday, as I did, order them on Amazon, prime delivery tomorrow, and they'll be here today?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not that they may be here today. They will be here today. And on my Alexa app on my desk,
Yeah.
I've already had my little yellow flashing light that says, your HP cartridges will be delivered today. And that is how technology is changing my expectation. That's my user experience, but that's not my expectation. And I went to buy something else online recently, and the supplier, nothing to do with Amazon, the supplier said, well, we haven't got one in stock. We might be able to get one in 2 or 3 weeks, and we might, and we might, and we might, and we might. And I switched off at that point.
And so raising expectations as they are, and it's not just Amazon, it could be Netflix in the world of entertainment, it could be that's Google for search, obviously long ago, all sorts of different examples where these really fantastic technology companies actually have built something that creates a completely different consumer expectation that most businesses, even large ones, let alone small ones, can't easily live up to.
Yeah. There's a fascinating podcast I was listening to, Harvard Business Review, yesterday, about why is Amazon so dominant and what their strategy has been. And it's very clever. Basically, they've invested enormous amounts of money in doing a lot of different things. So not only through my whatever I pay, I don't know what I pay, $7.99 a month Prime, I don't know what it is. Not only do I get free delivery, but I also get access to their video store.
Yeah.
Now, I don't watch TV. I genuinely don't watch very much, next to none. And they keep sending me emails saying, do you know you haven't used your Prime Video? And so last week, when I was supposed to be on holiday, but everywhere was in lockdown, so I sat here for a few days, I thought I'll watch some of these videos. And I found some of the books that I enjoy reading have now been turned into video. And I really enjoyed them. And I thought, wow, it's just wow. I mean, it's just changing the customer experience. So
we're enjoying the benefits, but hopefully the privacy laws will keep us safe from misuse of our data. And
yeah.
But yeah, I think the challenge for businesses is when consumer expectations of digital products or services are like that, you better be really good at them. Otherwise, you're going to disappear into irrelevance.
Yes, you have to use them. You have to use that technology now. Not saying you have to go and make films, but you have to be able to speak to your clients in a meaningful and focused way. And technology is an enabler to do that. Don't let the technology drive your business, but use technology to enable your business.
Yeah. And you mentioned books a minute ago. You wrote a book as well. So not only have you done all these big adventures and led businesses, you managed to find time to write a book.
Yeah, there we go.
Inspired leadership. So I have to confess, I haven't read the book, Kevin. I will do that now that I'm aware of it. What would I learn if I read the book? What can you tell me that would save me buying and reading the book?
Yeah, you'd learn how we have improved 10, 12, 15 companies over the past years. Some of the case studies are in there with, here's what we did right, but here's what we did wrong as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very open about where it didn't work, because it doesn't work all the time.
Yeah.
You'd also learn, the process I use when I go into a business, whether it's doing well or doing okay or doing badly. How do we take it on to the next level that's in there?
Yeah.
And just some of the stories around how do you engage people so that ordinary people become extraordinary? And that is the whole basis of what I believe. My job is to enable ordinary people to become extraordinary, because people are extraordinary. If you give them a chance to contribute, they will do so.
That's a powerful mantra, I think, that ordinary people, all ordinary people, have the ability to be extraordinary. That's a great mantra. I'm going to keep that one with me as something to remember, that the potential that is in everyone. I know you do a fair bit of speaking as well, mentoring. You're a non-exec. But tell us a bit about what you do there and the kinds of things you speak on, and maybe some of the more interesting places you've been to speak?
Oh, blimey, I've spoken all over the world now. It's great fun. I really enjoy it because you get to meet exciting and interesting audiences. What I speak about is what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's about giving the audience an hour so that they can go away and think, okay, I can do that. Wow, I can do that. And I see the model Kevin uses. I can take that and I can use it in my own business.
Yeah.
And that's what I talk about. And I use some of the expedition stories I use to illustrate a point.
Of course, yeah.
So a picture that I've used recently is after the storm, the determination. So
Yeah.
business will go through a storm, but when we woke up in the morning and our boat was still there and we were still there, then you've got to focus the determination. So I don't talk about the expeditions, but I say, look, here's an example. Here's what happened. Now focus the determination. So that's how I use the expedition stories.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and it's very inspiring when you do that because it makes it feel real. Business can seem a bit abstract sometimes, but
Yeah.
life or death, not so much.
Well, there's nothing worse than death by PowerPoint, is there? It's just dreadful.
No, definitely. And it's amazing all the things you've achieved. And my first reaction when I sort of, obviously I was aware of a lot of your experience and some of the things you do, but when I sort of read your bio and I look at the diversity and enormous number of achievements, my first reaction was, how do you find time? I'm conscious as well. I know you have a family. You mentioned your son on the trips, and family, business, adventures, books, talks. It sort of feels difficult sometimes, certainly for me, to think about how you find time even for one thing, let alone so many. So I wonder what's when you're at the peak of all of that, maybe, what's a day like for you? And like, how do you carve out time for all of these different interests alongside business?
Well, I said a minute ago, I don't watch telly. That saves me hours a day. I don't play golf. So my day is, I always start with some training or other. I'll ride my bike, or I'll drag some tires around the field, or I'll go in the gym, or I'll do something for an hour, hour and a half, first thing in the morning. Then I start to speak with my various businesses. The afternoon I spend working on projects, and in the evenings, I usually walk out. I'm here in my office. I walk out of my office I try to get out before 10 o'clock at night. That's my objective. And I'll spend the evening working on the next book or some ideas for a speech. So, yeah, look, I start at 7 in the morning and finish at 10 at night. And people say you're a workaholic. I said, well, I'm not a workaholic because I don't really work. I do what I enjoy doing, which is quite different than working.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing, actually. If it's your passion, then if you are genuinely following your passion, then it's not work. And working on things all day, all evening, at the weekend doesn't feel like work. It's not a chore.
Yeah, I typically don't work at the weekend. These days, I give myself the weekend off to go on a long bike ride or read a book or watch the sport. I watch rugby. I enjoy watching rugby and cricket. So I'll watch the rugby tomorrow. I'll enjoy that.
It's good to have achieved so much and still manage to find time, or at least now manage to find time to relax and wind down and kind of look after the mental health, I suppose, side of things. That benefits enormously from a little bit of a outage at the weekend. A couple of very conscious of time, Kevin. You've been very generous with your time. There's a couple of closing questions, if I can. The first one I wanted to ask you is, looking back across all of that, all of those achievements and the great things you've done, what would you say would be your advice to yourself, to your younger self, if you were to go back to maybe when you're 20 years old?
Yeah.
Is there one takeaway you would that's really landed for you that you would give as advice to younger people watching or yourself when you're younger?
Yeah, well, it's the same advice I'm giving to my son at the moment as he decides what he wants to do with his career.
Yeah.
And that is, follow your passion.
Yeah.
Follow what you're passionate about, because there will be a job there somewhere. Don't follow the job, follow the passion.
Yeah.
And be more confident. I was very underconfident in my 20s. I was just, simple working class lad from a working class background, and took me a while to realize that I could actually do this stuff. I could do this. So if I could go back, I'd tell myself, be a bit more confident, follow your passion.
Yeah. So it's a lot around belief, isn't it? Really,
Yeah, belief.
belief in yourself and what is possible. Believe in the things that don't seem plausible, and if you're passionate about them, then the effort can be put in without so much trouble, if you like, and with effort you'll find results. I think
Exactly that.
yeah, perfect. And then looking forward, like what's next for you? You've got another adventure planned? Are you in business? What are the big next things in your story?
Well, I'm involved in 3 or 4 very active businesses at the moment, so
Yeah.
I'd like to get them to a point where they're truly world class, and then we'll see what happens to them. Somebody will buy them, or I'll come away and let them go on their journey, or whatever will happen to them. Um, for me personally, we're working on the next expedition at the moment, which looks like being a river trip, so open canoe the length of the Yukon, which is long old way, but that's what we're playing with at the minute, which is, I think it's 3,000 miles of canoeing and camping, but it's not so arduous as the Atlantic Road.
No,
Um,
not much is. Probably nothing is.
well, there's not a race for a start, so
Yeah.
you go at your own pace. But the beauty of the outback of Canada and Alaska, and just enjoying that, so we're playing around with that at the moment, seeing where we go. That'll be
Excellent.
fun.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, I think I've taken enough of your time. I know you're a very busy man. I want to thank you for giving your time so generously and sharing all those insights with me and the people who watch this. I found it absolutely fascinating. Definitely can take some mantras from that would help me in my work and business, and I'm sure everybody watching will take something from it too. So thanks very much for giving your time and sharing so openly. It's really appreciated.
You're very welcome, Kelly. Great to speak to you.
You too.